We are so excited to see so many young people here today. We know that you are absolutely the future. We see it every day on television, and we are ready to go wherever you are going to lead. Jan Mulvihill, who organized this whole event. Without Jan, we would not have had the event. She cannot be here today because there was an accident in her family. Everybody's okay, but thank you, Jan, and we appreciate all the work that you did. I also want to thank Marion Herbert, who did the brilliant graphic designing, and Tammy Carter, who is responsible for the PR that brought everybody here tonight. I don't know if I should thank her or not. I would like to ask the amazing staff of the Newcomb College Institute and the Newcomb College Center for Research on Women to rise. Opportunity, if she is here tonight, I know she was getting sick. Is Nancy Mock here tonight? Well, I just wanted to say that she is the new Executive Director of the Newcomb College Center for Research on Women. Finally, I want to thank Marjorie Cohen and Debbie Grant for being here tonight. As that endangered species, a middle-aged feminist, I know that now, more than ever, we need a strong voice for women in this society. The lack of education for girls worldwide, the violence against women on a daily, minute-to-minute basis tells us that our struggle is certainly not over, has in fact hardly begun. I am honored and excited to stand on this stage tonight with one young woman who will be doing the introduction. She's not on the stage. And one wise woman who has never stopped being the voice of women through wave after wave of feminism. Newcomb College Institute held a contest to introduce Ms. Steinem today. Jill Zimmerman, the winner of this contest, is a senior English and philosophy major who is very involved in Newcomb student programs. She is the director of Newcomb Ambassadors, as well as a member of Mortarboard, Newcomb Senate, and Phi Beta Phi sorority. And Jill, if you would come up and do your introduction.
Gloria Steinem once said, "God may be in the details, but the goddess is in the questions. Once we begin to ask them, there's no turning back." In 1962, 1 year before Betty Friedan's notable The Feminine Mystique hit the bookshelves, Ms. Steinem published an article in Esquire magazine about the way in which women are forced to choose between a career and marriage. In that article, Ms. Steinem began asking questions about women's equality, and we haven't turned back since. Ms. Steinem's lifelong career as writer, journalist, and leader of the second wave feminist movement has transformed the world we live in today. As a young American woman graduating from college in just a few months, I expect certain things. That after college I will pursue a career in a field of my choosing, that I will receive equal treatment and equal pay as my male colleagues, that when or if I get married, I will be free to continue in my career, and that I have every opportunity available to me, as do my male classmates graduating beside me. 52 years ago, when Ms. Steinem graduated from Smith College, women could not expect these things. And so she began asking why. Since that first article, Ms. Steinem has co-founded the feminist Ms. Magazine and Ms. Foundation for Women, as well as other women's political organizations, including the National Women's Political Caucus, the Women's Action Alliance, the Coalition of Labor Union Women, the Women's Media Center, and Choice USA. She has written 4 best-selling books, co-produced a documentary on child abuse for HBO, and a feature film for Lifetime. She has also won a number of awards for articles published in magazines and newspapers across the world. Because of these contributions over the past 5 decades, we have gained momentous ground in our fight for equal rights for women, and yet Ms. Steinem shows no sign of slowing down. She is currently at work on a new book, Road to the Heart, America as If Everyone Mattered, about her more than 30 years on the road as a feminist organizer. She is also working at the Sophia Smith Collection at Smith College on a project to document the grassroots origins of the U.S. women's movement. Ms. Steinem's activism as a feminist leader inspires me and women of all ages to take risks, to fight for our rights, and to fight for the rights of others. She inspires women to ask the questions that change the world. It is my honor to introduce the Newcomb College Institute's 2008 Powerhouse Speaker, Ms. Gloria Steinem.
Great introduction. I'll only have to live past 100 to live up to that introduction, but I thank you so much. And are we going to have a great time tonight or what? Thanks to the staff of the Newcomb College Institute, and thanks to everyone who has worked to make this evening possible, and thanks to each one of you who has had the generosity of spirit to take time out of your busy lives and come here and take a chance on a stranger. It walks, it talks, it's a feminist. We have something very special, which is an hour or so in this room, in a combination of people that has never happened before in exactly the same way, and will never happen again in exactly the same way. So here's my plan. If all goes well, we each will leave here with one new idea or fact or feeling of support or subversive organizing tactic. And in order to make that happen, we need to be free to learn from each other, to pretend we're sitting in a circle, not in this old-fashioned hierarchical structure with you looking at each other's backs and me looking at you. Hierarchy is based on patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't work anywhere anymore, at home, in the workplace, in this room. So I hope that during what's usually called the question and answer time, you will feel quite okay about not just asking questions, but giving us answers, telling where the bodies are buried locally. If you'd rather not, you can pass me a note, and I'm leaving early in the morning, I'll read anything. And truly to learn from each other. I feel especially moved to be here because it's the first time that I have been here since Katrina. And I say from the bottom of my heart to you that people in other places in this country and in the world have not forgotten. It is so impressed upon us, not in the same traumatic way that you have experienced it, but so clear in imagery and suffering and unfairness, at the discrimination it revealed, the poverty it revealed, the totally incompetent government it revealed, that your suffering here has not been entirely in vain, because people have learned enormously from it. In fact, in New York, where I live, and where, of course, we experienced 9/11, it's very clear to us that it was much more traumatic for all of you and much more widespread. You could live in New York above 14th Street and not know or not feel every day what had happened to the Twin Towers. I doubt that there are very many places here where people could make the same statement. So I hope that we can make good things come out of bad. And I would like to take as my text, therefore, for the evening, a story with which I used to end lectures, which I felt was empowering, and I do think is empowering to each of us. and that is the physicist who wrote that the flap of a butterfly's wing can change the weather hundreds of miles away. It gives us such a good idea of how strong our actions can be, our language with each other, our attitudes, our every day and every week, how much difference that can make. But I stopped saying it, actually, because even I, hopeaholic that I am, began to feel that it was a little New Age sounding, you know, it sounded a little too easy. So I went back and read about the progress to a butterfly, and I discovered that the caterpillar has within its body imaginal cells. Lovely word, isn't it? I mean, that's actually the right scientific term, imaginal cells. And those imaginal cells know how to become a butterfly, but they are resisted by the existing body of the caterpillar. And it is the process of the energy in the cells, the programming of the cells, and the resistance of the caterpillar's body that produces a gelatinous mass that feeds the butterfly and gives birth to the butterfly. That seems to me a much more realistic image of how change happens. It comes out of friction, of opposition, of suffering, and yet it still can give birth to the butterfly. So I hope we keep that in mind as we consider all that we are going through now. Of course, there are also great harbingers of butterflies to come. I would say that I never in my life expected to see an election like this one, with two candidates who are expanding the pool of talent beyond, way beyond the usual, how many, 43 white guys have been president? And proving that affirmative action, which was said by its enemies to lower standards, in fact, has always raised standards by enlarging the pool of talent. And now we see that that has happened at this upper level. Look at the debates. I mean, the debates were incredible, right? I mean, they're a great lesson in democracy, probably better than anything that our foreign policy or our military could impose as people watch them around the world. And I watched them and I thought, you know, neither Reagan nor this Bush could ever have got to the White House if they had had to debate Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. Simply impossible. So I think that we are at a place that is both in many ways the worst of times and the best of times. And we need to remember the folks who led to this. Think about Shirley Chisholm, who ran for president in 1972, who took the white male-only sign off the White House door. We need to remember her, and we need to understand that this is up to us. You know, every time I hear myself saying or hear someone else saying, who can win, I always think to myself, okay, I've just given up all my power. The question is who we can make win. It's really up to us, and with the new levels of participation, I think really it's possible. So during our organizing time, I hope we can talk about the election if you'd like to, or I hope we can talk about whatever's going on campus that you think it deserves changing or deserves praising or is an example in any way for the rest of the country, whatever it is that you want to bring up. I talked with a group of women students earlier today and asked their advice, and the advice ranged all the way for subject matter for tonight, from something as simple as talking about the word feminist, which of course, if one just goes to the dictionary, one can see that it just means a person male or female, who believes in the full social, economic, political equality of women and men. And of course, it's not the only word. There's womanist, it's a great word. There's mujerista. I wish I spoke Spanish so I could be. There's women's liberationist. We have choices, but they all stand for the same idea. And one day, of course, we won't need a word, but now we need one very badly. I say this because I understand that it's still not so easy to stand up and say I'm a feminist, that there's a notion that these are bra-burning revolutionaries, which of course we are, but actually no one ever burned a bra, do you know that? There was a demonstration against the Miss America contest, and against the contest, not against the contestants. Women put in Atlantic City a garbage can on the boardwalk and put in it a bra, a steno pad, a dust mop, an apron, various symbols of women's stereotypical role, but they didn't burn it because they couldn't get a fire permit. It's remarkable to me, actually, that 30%, at least 30% of women of all ages in this country in public opinion polls self-identify as feminists, considering that Rush Limbaugh is, busy telling us that saying things like feminazi. That, incidentally, is more than self-identify as Republicans. They never say compared to what, right? If you give the definition, then it's over 60%. So all the way from something as simple as the definition of feminist to something as complex as thinking about and doing something about the rate of violence, especially sexual violence, on many campuses, including this campus. And when we can get to a place where people finally feel safe. So I hope you will feel free to bring up anything. And I would like to try to place us a little bit in history by reminding us that we are, as far as historians concerned, still in the second wave, but the first wave, as we count history in this young country, that is from when the first Europeans arrived, which is not at all how we should count the history of this country, the first wave was the abolitionist and suffragist era, in which the goal was to gain a legal identity as human beings for men of color and white women and women of color. So for half the population who were not counted as human beings but were property, who were, some of whom were enslaved, some of whom were indentured, all of whom were chattel, to gain a legal identity, beginning at that status, took more than a century. Now, in this second wave, we're striving for legal and social equality. Yes, we have identity. No, we don't have equality. And this has progressed quite a lot, but not nearly enough. I was thinking during the introduction about and earn the same. No, not even that. We've moved from 59 cents on the dollar to 77 cents on the dollar with breathtaking speed. We have invented comparable worth in order to accommodate the fact that women are still concentrated between 60 and 70% in pink-collar ghettos, where equal pay really doesn't mean anything. Equal to whom? To the nurse who's standing next to you, who's getting poorly paid too? So we started to compare it to a job occupied by men that had comparable training, say a pharmacist, and that's what comparable worth is. And yet we're still in a place where we are only counting, really, the work that could be done by men as salaried work. We're still not counting the 30% of work in the country that is productive and is caregiving. taking care of children, taking care of invalids, taking care of elderly parents. That is 30% of the productive work in the country, and it has no economic value whatsoever. So not only do we need to get equal pay and comparable pay, but we need to attribute an economic value to all productive work. Now that may sound like a big order, but actually we can do it, and there are very practical proposals to change the tax code so that we do that, so that we attribute an economic value to caregiving work at replacement level. We make that tax deductible if we pay taxes, and if we're too poor to pay taxes, we make it tax refundable. So it substitutes for the disaster of welfare reform. That means not only that both the famous soccer moms and the welfare moms have common cause, because both benefit from attributing value to this very important work, but also that it's in the national interest. Caregiving work is by and large better done, more humanely done, and less expensively done in the home, not always, but usually. It means that that value would be attributed, obviously, whether it's done by women or men. So perhaps it would encourage men to do it too, because right now it's 90% done by women. And it would hopefully change a culture in which homemakers are, or caregivers, unpaid caregivers, are made to feel apologetic. How many women are still going around who are homemakers saying, I don't work? Of course they work. They work longer hours for less pay, with more incidents of depression, violence, alcoholism than any other class of worker in the United States, and more likelihood of being replaced by a younger worker. So we can't really even plan economically unless we attribute a value to the work that currently is called not work. The only other economic step forward we need that is as big is attributing a value to the environment, so that it's no longer the case that a tree that's standing there giving you oxygen has no value, but if you cut it down, it has a value. I mean, no wonder we are destroying the environment, because every economic incentive is moving in that direction. There's nothing on the other side of the ledger when corporations or when any force damages the environment or destroys the environment. And we are committed to do this within the United Nations, but of course it hasn't happened so far. So that's just one. I think you can take any subject, and it's fun actually to take any subject and see where it was when the movement started, like equal pay, where it is now, equal pay and comparable worth, where it could go, which is redefining work to include all productive work. And you can take each subject and see where we are and how far there is to go. I think it's helpful because then we can think to ourselves, where have we been in 30 years? Okay, it's this much space. So let's take the same amount of space and move forward and see where we could be in another 30 years. This afternoon we were talking about the double role problem. If one of women's jobs is invisible in the home, then she's always going to have two jobs. She's always going to have a job at home and taking care of the kids or doing whatever is the work in the home is, and a job outside the home. So, it's true that there are now many more men who are taking an active part in child rearing, and that's a huge step forward. But we still don't have changed job patterns so that both parents of babies and small children could do that without, one doesn't have to stay home all the time, one doesn't have to, that both parents could have a work life outside the home and be really co-parenting, not babysitting. Men are not babysitting their own children, but being real active, full parents. We're very far from that, very, very far from that. And we don't have the job patterns that would accommodate it, say working 3 days a week or a shorter work day. We don't have childcare. We're the only advanced democracy in the whole world without a national system of childcare. We're the only advanced democracy in the whole world without a national system of health care. Women need the healthcare system, and this you don't hear in the debates, even while you're hearing great detail, that women need the healthcare system 30% more than men do because of childbearing. So it's a penalty for men, it's an even greater penalty for women. So we can take each of these subjects and see where we've been, where we are, and where we have to go. But I think I wanted to say, especially this evening, something that has grown in me and perhaps in you too. For all that this is a historic election, it's driving me crazy, I don't know about you, that sex and race are presented as two opposing forces, that they are being presented as competitive. If we'd had Shirley Chisholm, she would have laid that to rest. You know? But the media is treating it that way. So I would just like to speak a little bit to connections, to linkages, to the fact that all these things are enmeshed, and remind us that if you have a racist structure, a racist system of any kind, the only way to maintain it is to maintain racial purity, whatever that means, or at least some degree of visible difference. And in the long term, the only way you can do that is to control the bodies of women. That's why white women were restricted, and why women of color became the producers of cheap labor. It's why the most punished crime historically in this country was not murder or theft or arson. It was miscegenation, which meant the taking over of the body of a white woman by a man of color, even out of free choice and love. That was the most punishable crime, and we all know the horrendous history of this, I think. And yet, the opposite was not a crime. Taking over the body of a woman of color by a white man, even by force, even by rape, was not a crime. Because he, in any case, owned her, owned the children who would be cheap labor. So this, I hope, I mean, that's a very short way of saying why these two caste systems are so intertwined and inextricable. I mean, if you poured water on what I just said, it would become like, 3 volumes. But I think it helps us to see why, whether it is women and Jews in Nazi Germany, or women, black and white women, and men of African descent in this country, can't you see why they're so intertwined? It is not possible. It is not possible to be a feminist and not also be an anti-racist. And it is not possible to be for the rights of any racial group and be for the rights of only half of the racial group. That makes no sense on its face. But also not see the connection to the sexual caste system. So I hope that one day, when we have an election like this and we have lots of different folks, which I hope we continue to have, we will understand that the sex and race caste systems are not to be ranked, which is what's happening in the media, but to be linked. Now, there's one other big way in which we have not properly linked, I think, usually. Because, issues are still presented like a laundry list, don't you think? As if they're supposed to be separate groups. And what that means is that if you don't think you belong to that group, you don't think you're supposed to object when there's some injustice to another group. But of course, it's in our interest. It's in our enlightened interest to do that. And the second set of linkages and connections, which is all part of the same thing here, is the answer, I think, to why the women's movements and movements for gay and lesbian rights always come together. Whether it was also in Nazi Germany between World Wars I and II, that was true. If you look, I mean, wherever you look, they generally come together. It's important to understand why, because otherwise it seems quite illogical that that our common adversaries, and they are common adversaries, are both opposed to lesbianism and contraception. But if you understand that what they are saying, once again, as in the case of the sex and race caste systems, they are trying to control sexuality and reproduction. So what they are telling us is that sexuality is only okay when it is directed toward having children and takes place inside patriarchal marriage, so the children are properly owned, and everything else is not okay. And they're still telling us that, right? So it's why the women's movement, whatever the sexuality of women may be, and the gay rights, lesbian rights, transsexual, you know, all the forms of sexual liberation, owe each other support and always arise together. Because women have to separate sexuality from reproduction in order to control our own lives. Whether we can decide when and whether to have children is the biggest determinant of whether we're healthy or not, whether we are educated or not, what our economic status is. It affects everything else, absolutely everything else. And sexuality between two men or between two women, of course, stands for non-procreative sex. So all our adversaries, if nothing else, the fact that our adversaries are all the same should give us a big clue. But I think it's helpful to see what the linkages are. I remember trying to explain this somewhere years ago, and every once in a while I think, you know, how did it happen that I ended up standing in front of large groups discussing sexuality? It's just nothing I expected growing up in Toledo, Ohio. And perhaps I was looking uncomfortable because I was rescued by a woman in a little flowered dress and pearls, very subversive outfit, who got up and said, "Well, my dear," she said, "human beings have always been the only animals who can experience equal sexual pleasure and orgasms and so on when they can conceive and when they can't. Usually animals, although I always worry that I'm oppressing animals at this point, but anyway, usually animals have periods of heat or estrus in which sexual desire and pleasure are focused. Human beings uniquely don't. So for us, our sexuality is a mark of our humanity, like our cerebral cortex, our ability to reason, to remember, not only to think, but to think about thinking, the self-consciousness. That sexuality is for us uniquely not only a way we procreate if we choose to, but also a way we communicate, also a way we reach out to each other and express love and caring and bond with each other, and it has ever been thus. And the right wing, and especially the religious right wing, has been lying to us about the nature of human sexuality in order to try to direct it all towards having children inside heterosexual patriarchal marriage. So does that make sense to you? I mean, that all these things are connected, and why it's important that we... So I hope that the notion that the movement is over, which is actually just the current form of obstructionism. I mean, in the beginning, they said, you're going against nature. You're going against God. You're going against Freud. And we said, yes, you got it. But they were basically telling us it was impossible. Then we did it anyway, of course. And so then they started to say, well, okay, but so it used to be necessary to make these changes, but not anymore. So you are living in an age in which people are likely to say it's post-feminist or, you know, post-racist. Excuse me, you know. It makes no sense. It's like saying post-democracy. Do we have a perfect democracy? No. Are we living in a do we have feminism? No, we are not living in a post-feminist age. So I hope that we can use this to just sail along and not fall for this notion that it's over. In fact, we're probably, I mean, by historical pattern of the suffragists and the abolitionists, I guess we have about 70 years to go, something like that. We're about 30, 35 years into this. And there probably will be other movements in the future, too, until we get to a place where we're recognized as the unique people we are in this room. And the question of how much melanin there is in our skin doesn't dictate our future, and there's no idea that our genitals dictate our brains. See, I have this vision that someday some lecturer will be coming around and talking to students, and we'll be saying, once upon a time that was true, you know? And the students will be saying, oh, give me a break. Because the truth of the matter is, there's probably more difference in every way except choosing to reproduce, but in every other way, there's more difference between two women and between two men than there are generalized group differences between males and females. And there's, except for resistance to certain diseases and so on, with races, it's the same thing. There's more difference probably between any two members of the same race than there are between generalized differences between races. And what the great reward of this movement is that it sets free the uniqueness in each of us and the shared humanity at the same time. Yes, we share infinitely more than we do not as a human species. And on top of that, each of us are a unique combination of millennia upon millennia of heredity and environment combined in a way that could never have happened before and could never happen again. And that combination is in you when you are born. Everybody who's ever met a baby knows there's a person in that baby, right? So the question is to support that uniqueness and those particular talents and that true voice that's in each of us, and allow us to be both communally human and unique at the same time. It's not so easy. The unique part is not so easy because we are also communal. Here's the good news. The good news is we're communal creatures, which allows us to adapt and survive as a species. Here's the bad news. We're communal creatures, which means we are incredibly sensitive to expectation. People think we're smart, people think we're dumb. People, you know, we have roles to play, we play them because we want to be part of the community, we want to fit in. So we need to have respect and support for our shared humanity and for our uniqueness if we are ever to really fully realize it. So I hope that this makes sense to you in some way that you can use, you know, in your daily life, because the great secret of change, I think, is that it doesn't happen from the top down. Like houses don't get built from the top down. It happens from the bottom up. And it isn't if we're going for this kind of transformation, revolution, whatever you want to call it, the only way it happens is if we do it in some small daily ways all the time. I think Marx and Engels were very smart, nice guys, but one big mistake they made was that the end justifies the means, or the means, right? Is that right? Yeah, the ends justifies the means. In fact, the means dictate the ends. The kind of means we use create the ends. So, if we want a future of respect and love and poetry and sex and humor and music, we have to have today means that are respect and love and poetry and music now, as much as we possibly can. Not to, I know that especially for students, you're encouraged to lead a deferred life, right? To think up there. But as Buddhists certainly tell us, you can only live in the present. That's it. You can only live now as it happens. So do whatever tiny version of whatever it is you want in the future, do a version of it now. And I think that if we do that and do it with respect for each other, and do it with a sense of joy and fun, and people think that feminists have no sense of humor, that we're not, what are all the, all the stereotypes better than I do. Because, you'd think I would know them, I've lived with them, but it seems so bizarre to me that I can't, we once had a cover of Ms. Magazine in which a guy in a cartoon, thing is saying, do you know that, to a young woman, do you know feminists have no sense of humor? And she's saying, no, but hum a few bars and I'll fake it. And if we just refuse to feel abnormal, the idea of normalcy is how they get to us. For instance, think about the whole idea that divorce is a failure. Now, it happens that marriage, even when people only live to be 50, didn't necessarily last. I mean, now we live 30 years longer. Well, so no wonder that people are likely, some people will marry young, have children, raise them together, then go off, amicably in other directions. Some people will have children later, no children, live with and love members of the same gender. Some people will do all of those things serially. Why is that a failure? Why do we let them convince us? Children of divorce, we see on television shows all the time. How about a television show about children of marriage? Just to see, what the contrast is. We are, well, maybe we should do. We really need to question the idea that there is only one way. There is not one way. There is your way with support, and the only thing that seems to me uniform is that we need community. We need people who treat us with respect and share our values so that we can develop as communal creatures. So I hope that we consider, for instance, the connection between family forms and political forms. And all the time that I've been going around to campuses, I've been trying to, I've been asking if there was any government or political science course that started with family forms. Family forms happen to be the biggest determinant of whether you have a democracy or not. If you don't have democratic families, it's much harder to have a democratic structure, because that's where you get the whole idea of what's normal and what feels like home and what respect is and so on. If you have violence in the home, you have violence in the street and in foreign policy. the only form of arms control, really, in the end, is how we raise our children. Right? So once more, the means dictates the ends. So whatever it is that you, however small it may seem, whatever transformational change you are making in your life, it is important. It is important. And perhaps the feeling we have in this room, and the discussion we have in this room, and the respect and the love we show for each other means that one day the world will be a lot more like this room. Thank you.